History is not all about names and dates. It's about humanity's greatest stories. Fiction and primetime TV have nothing on the real stories that put them all to shame. This is a delicious appetizer that can be filling on its own, but leaves you wanting more. Like nachos. History nachos. Sometimes circumstances change so fast that everything depends on the ability to adapt. It requires the boldness to venture into uncharted territory. This guy is one of the pioneers of modern warfare because he did exactly that. Born a nobleman in a time of kings and empires, he was raised hunting in the deep forests of Europe. When duty called, he answered by enlisting as one of the first ever fighter pilots. He used the same hunting skills in the sky with great success. With 80 confirmed kills, he earned the title Ace of Aces for the First World War. His tactics were so effective that they are still taught to modern fighter pilots. The mere sight of his plane struck terror into the hearts of his opponents. To his friends, he was Manfred. To everyone else, he was the Red Baron. Welcome to Episode 4, Manfred von Richthofen, Maverick in a Biplane. Twofold fates are bearing me toward the doom of death. If I abide here and war about the city of the Trojans, then lost is my homecoming. But my renown shall be imperishable. But if I return home to my dear native land, lost then is my glorious renown. Yet shall my life long endure, and the doom of death will not find me any time soon. Achilles in Homer's Iliad. In the Iliad, Achilles is given a fateful decision: leave the fight or jump back into the fray. If Achilles leaves the Trojan War, he will live a long but unremarkable life. If he stays and fights, Achilles will win eternal glory, but will die in the process. Achilles chooses to fight. More than 3,000 years later, Manfred von Richthofen was put in a nearly identical position, and he made the same choice. Richtofen was born into the Prussian nobility in 1892. Prussia was an emerging world power composed mainly of a united Germany. The Kingdom of Prussia had spent 2 centuries taking over the numerous German kingdoms. The country was only united for about a generation before Richtofen came along. Military strength has been a key component of German culture since prehistory. Prussia took that militaristic spirit and cranked it to 11. The Prussian military dominated the battlefield and was even compared to ancient Sparta. The martial spirit was especially strong in the aristocracy. Richtofen was the eldest son of his family and grew up loving sports and hunting from a young age. At 11, his father sent him to a top military school in Berlin so he would be ready for combat as soon as he reached adulthood. Richtofen really did not want to go, but there was nothing he could do. He was a kid. He slowly got used to military life and eventually came to like it. He ultimately graduated from military school at 17 and became a commissioned officer in the cavalry, just like his father. The cavalry was traditionally where nobles went in the military because they knew how to ride horses well. Rich dudes simply had the time and money to maintain horses and learn advanced riding techniques. Richtofen was a skilled rider and natural outdoorsman, so it was a perfect fit. Right after Richtofen turned 22, World War I broke out. His cavalry unit saw some action on both the eastern and western fronts in the early days, which resulted in Richtofen being awarded the Iron Cross, a huge military honor. But when trench warfare set in, cavalry became useless and obsolete. Richthofen's unit was reassigned to supply duty for the trenches, which was much less dangerous. Remember, Prussia was still a kingdom, and kingdoms historically have protected their aristocracy in wartime. Richthofen's whole life had led up to fighting in the biggest conflict of the age. Now it was finally on, and a few months in, he was stuck delivering food. Richthofen was at a huge decision point. He could stay in his cushy unit and likely survive, but miss out on one of the biggest fights in human history. Richthofen had already demonstrated his bravery under fire and been highly decorated, so nobody would question his bravery if he sat out the rest of the war. Option 2 was to find another way to fight on his terms and really reach his potential. But it bore a gigantic risk of death. Just like Achilles, Richthofen was a born warrior, and he chose option 2. Richthofen requested a transfer, declaring he did not sign up to, quote, collect cheese and eggs, unquote. However, Richthofen was smart. He saw the senseless slaughter of sending human waves into machine guns and wanted no part of it. Instead, he signed up for the Imperial German Air Service. Flying was still pretty dangerous, but it had better odds than running headlong through artillery and machine gun fire. Aerial combat was also much less restrictive than ground operations at the time, which meant Richthofen could actually put his tactical skills to use. Airplanes were a total game changer in World War I. The Wright brothers' first flight was only 11 years before the outbreak of war. All of a sudden, a whole new dimension was added to the battlefield. At the start of World War I, there were mainly just theories of how aircraft could be used in a full-blown modern war. The commanders had all come up in the age of 2D tactics. At first, they mainly used airplanes to scout enemy positions and call in artillery strikes. Planes were just another part of the 2D battlefield. The pilots from both sides were flying close enough to each other that they started bringing handguns and taking pot shots. Then both sides got a revolutionary idea. Strap a machine gun to an airplane and use it to take out the observers. And so the fighter plane was born. Now those 2D tacticians were playing on a 3D battlefield. This kicked off an arms race in military aircraft. By the end of the war, tons of different planes with different weapons were created to take advantage of the not-so-friendly skies. When Richtofen signed up for the air service in mid-1915, both observers and fighters were already in the air. Pilot training took 3 months, but observer training only took 4 weeks. Richtofen was chomping at the bit to get in the air, since he thought the war would be over by the time he completed pilot training. He was not outside the norm. On the front end of World War I, most people thought it would be over quickly. That's not exactly how it turned out. Anyway, Richtofen absolutely loved flying from the start, even if he was not the one at the controls. Richtofen quickly finished his observer training and was deployed to the Eastern Front to help fight the Russians. To be clear, Richtofen was not flying any planes. His job was to sit in the back seat with a camera and take pictures of the Russian troop positions. At this point, he was basically the World War I version of Goose from Top Gun. Within a couple of months, Richtofen was transferred to the Western Front, but not as an observer anymore. Now he was made a bombardier. He was still just along for the ride in the backseat of a bomber, but now he got to blow stuff up. For the time, this was like going into space and blowing up enemies with laser weapons from Star Wars. Richtofen liked his job. He loved watching the explosions so much that one time he started frantically waving at the pilot to turn and give him a better view. He waved just a little too much and he lost a fingertip in the propeller. Richtofen actually got his first kill while in the backseat. He had a machine gun and used it to take down a plane. It crashed behind enemy lines, so it was not officially counted since there was not enough evidence. However, things changed when the German military rolled out the Eindecker, roughly means one wing. Whenever you think of World War I planes, something with 2 or 3 wings usually comes to mind. This plane only had 1 set of wings, and was the first plane Germany specifically engineered to be a fighter. It also had a huge advantage: the interrupter. An interrupter is a mechanical device that allows the plane's machine guns to shoot between the spinning propeller blades. Before this point, firing through a spinning propeller would mean shooting your own plane, and that's if the ricochets did not kill you. As a result, the guns on fighters were located in all kinds of goofy positions, like on the very top or out on the wings. This made it pretty difficult to aim. With the interrupter, the machine gun could be put right in front of the pilot. Suddenly, it was a lot easier to aim. The Eindecker immediately began to dominate the skies. Airmen looked at the Eindecker the way car guys look at Ferraris. It was sleek, cool, and deadly. Richtofen was smitten, and he immediately tried to get his hands on one. Only one problem. Richtofen had no idea how to fly a plane. So Richtofen asked one of the pilots he had flown with in the past to teach him. After only 24 hours of tutoring, Richtofen took to the air on his first solo flight and crashed the landing. He practiced a couple weeks, then just decided to go to flying school. Now it was late 1915, and it had become obvious that the war was not going to end anytime soon. 5 months later, he returned to his same unit, but now he was officially a pilot. He did not get to fly the Eindecker at first, because there weren't very many, and most of them were given to the guys who had already proven themselves. Richtofen eventually did get to fly one on a timeshare basis, but he was disappointed. By the time Richtofen got to fly it, the Eindecker's dominance was ending because the other side's technology was catching up. After Richtofen crashed his Eindecker, he was done with it. Richtofen's unit was sent back to the Eastern Front, where he was reassigned to fly bombers. Richtofen still liked bombing runs, but now he dreamed of flying fighters again. Enter Oswald Bohlke, Germany's leading ace in late 1916 after the death of his rival. He was one of the first ever fighter pilots. He created the Dicta Bohlke, which were the rules of successful aerial combat until the advent of the jet engine and long-range plane-to-plane missiles. Even now, many of the principles apply and are still taught. By late 1916, Bohlke was a national hero. Bohlke visited Richtofen's unit because he was forming a designated fighter squadron called Jasta II and looking for pilots. Richtofen basically got invited to Germany's version of Top Gun. This would be like Luke Skywalker coming into your workplace on a random Tuesday and asking if you want to learn from him how to fly an X-Wing. Richtofen jumped all over it. Within 3 days, he left for the Western Front. The original Jasta II was just a few pilots, all intensively trained by Bohlke himself. Several of them would later become some of Germany's top aces. Since Jasta II was Bohlke's handpicked unit, they got the latest and greatest fighter planes. By this point, the Eindecker monoplane was yesterday's news. Now Jasta II got the Albatros D2. It was one of the fastest planes in the sky, and it had 2 forward-mounted machine guns. In short, this thing was fast as heck, and it hit twice as hard as its competition. The Albatros D-Series fighters became Richtofen's weapon of choice, and he later scored most of his kills while flying them. The next morning, after the new Albatros fighters arrived, Richtofen got his first confirmed kill. Following Bohlke's training, he dived out of the sun with the rest of Jasta II and took out an English observer plane over German territory. The other pilot was skilled, but his observer plane was no match for the Albatros in a fight. Richtofen was so excited he landed next to the other plane to look at his first confirmed kill. The observer was already dead, but the pilot was still barely alive. He respectfully smiled and acknowledged Richtofen as the victor, then passed out and died. Richtofen was so excited to tell the rest of Jasta 2 about his kill over breakfast. He showed up late because he had followed the kill. It turned out everybody in Jasta 2 got a kill on that mission, so Richtofen walked into a party. Jasta 2 had arrived and proved Bolka's training worked. According to Richtofen, this event so scared the British that they never again ventured into that part of the sky when they knew Bolka and Jasta 2 were around. Jasta 2 basically worked like a shutdown defensive cornerback for their part of the skies over the Western Front. Remember, Richtofen grew up hunting and viewed himself as a hunter in the skies. A big part of hunting is the trophy. Richtofen immediately ordered a silver cup custom engraved with the date of the kill. This was his version of antlers on the wall. From now on, Richtofen would order a similar cup for every kill until Germany's silver supply became too scarce. However, Jasta 2's invincibility would not last long. Within a few months, half of the original pilots died in combat, and several more had mental breakdowns. The most devastating loss came less than 2 months after Jasta 2's first mission. Erwin Bulma, a future top ace, Richtofen, and a few others accompanied Bolka on a mission. Bulma was Bolka's best friend and acting as Bolka's wingman. In the confusion of an aerial fight, Bulma's plane grazed Bolka and ripped off part of Bolka's wing. Bolka crashed and died, but had never been defeated in aerial combat. Jasta 2 was devastated, and so was all of Germany. Germany had lost one of its national heroes and a top ace. Bolka was not just a great fighter. He could train others to be great fighters too, which made him a huge asset for the military. His loss was huge for both military and PR reasons. But Richtofen was steadily gaining more kills, and it looked like he would become the new Bolka. Bolka had even outwardly noted that Richtofen was one of his most promising pilots. Richtofen was basically Jasta 2's version of Maverick from Top Gun. He even famously took down Major Hawker, one of Britain's high-profile aces. Richtofen's flying ability is not what made him so successful. He was a good pilot, but far from the most agile. That I would give to Werner Voss, Richtofen's wingman and best friend. His last stand is one of the most famous World War I dogfights because his flying pushed the laws of physics, and he almost beat 6 of Britain's top aces. At the same time. By himself. Anyway, Richtofen's success came from his brilliant mind. He made sure to know the performance stats of planes he was likely to encounter, especially compared to his own fighter. He would adjust the attack based on his knowledge. This is one of the key points of the Dicta Bolka. Richtofen would often win before the first shot because he would not attack unless he secured several advantages. Instead of rushing into a fight, he would quickly make a rough plan based on the circumstances and each plane's capabilities. Then go ahead. It was very common for pilots' emotions to get the better of them. And I'm not just talking about fear. Bravery, patriotism, and youthful aggression would often make new pilots just charge in as soon as they sighted an enemy plane. Richtofen's distinct ability to always stay cool, calm, and calculating is what made him great. Richtofen even wrote, quote, "He who gets excited in fighting is sure to make mistakes," unquote. Within a few months, Richtofen would become Germany's new top living ace with his 16th kill in January 1917. For this feat, the military gave Richtofen command of his own fighter unit, Jasta 11. Richtofen was also awarded the Blue Max, Germany's highest military honor. It was the German equivalent of the Congressional Medal of Honor or the Victoria Cross. Now Richtofen had made a name for himself, and was well known among pilots on both sides. Richtofen was always bold, so he decided to distinguish himself from the other planes by modifying his Albatross with a distinctive red paint job. His plane quickly became known to the Allies as Le Petit Rouge, French for the Little Red, and it became one of the most feared planes in the sky. Richtofen learned of the nickname after he had a conversation with 2 British airmen he had just shot down. Richtofen had no issue killing his opponents, but if presented with the opportunity, he preferred to just shoot down the plane and not kill the pilot. He landed next to the downed plane and talked to the Englishmen like they were all saying good game after a soccer match. Richthofen's now signature look combined with his noble pedigree, and Richthofen became known as the Red Baron. The PR wing of the German government loved it and plastered the story of the Red Baron everywhere, making Richthofen a national hero and celebrity. He was flooded with fan mail. Back on the front lines, when Richtofen took over command of Jasta 11, it was a mess. Nobody had gotten a single kill. In keeping with Bolka's tradition, Richthofen went up and got the squadron's first kill to light a fire under his men. His younger brother was also transferred to his command. Richthofen trained Jasta 11 the way Bolka had trained him, and now Richthofen had a new goal: make Jasta 11 beat Jasta 2's kill count. The units quickly became friendly rivals. Richthofen allowed his men to paint their planes bright, wild colors to distinguish themselves as a unit. This is how Jasta 11 got its immortal nickname, the Flying Circus. The spring of 1917, especially April, is what Richthofen is best known for. Even though German planes were outnumbered 3-1, Richthofen and his men brought down Allied planes left and right. During this period, Jasta 11 finally surpassed Jasta 2. Richthofen's brother even became an ace in his own right by getting 20 kills in his first month. The high command was impressed, so in May they promoted Richthofen to be in charge of several fighter squadrons. But first he was allowed to go on leave for a much-needed break. Richthofen left his brother in charge of Jasta 11 while Richthofen toured Germany. He met the Kaiser and other powerful people, got to visit his family, went game hunting, and was treated like a rock star everywhere he went. When Richthofen returned to the front in June, he was fresh and ready for his new higher command. Even though Richthofen had climbed in rank, he was still going into battle. Less than a month into his new command, Richthofen nearly died. A random shot grazed his skull, which made Richthofen temporarily blind and paralyzed. Not a good situation to be in when you are flying a plane in the middle of a battle. Richthofen was able to regain his senses just enough to make an emergency landing behind German lines. He was rushed to the nearest hospital and miraculously survived. As always, Richthofen was eager to get back into battle. Less than 3 weeks after his worst close call, Richthofen returned to duty despite the doctor's objections. A head injury is no joke. Richthofen suffered from headaches and nausea due to his wound, and he began to act, severely depressed. Personally, I think the depression is due to the combination of a head injury, such a close call, and coming to terms with the fact that he was not Superman, despite his public image. In short, he was coming to grips with his mortality after feeling bulletproof. Shortly after his head wound, Richthofen also got a new plane, the Fokker F-1. Just like his trusty Albatross, he painted it red. The F-1 had 3 wings, and is what Richthofen is most famous for using. This was the latest and greatest the German military had to offer. However, Richthofen's wounds still bothered him, so he took more desperately needed time off in early September 1917. He briefly came back in October and got a few kills, but after that he would not fly again until March 1918, due to the time off and command duties. When Richthofen took back to the skies, he got 16 more kills. On April 21st, 1918, Richthofen was on a routine mission that turned into a fight. He saw an injured enemy plane break away from the group and decided to go for it. Richthofen broke his own rules by getting tunnel vision and just following the plane. He did not realize that he was flying low above enemy lines, and another enemy fighter had gotten behind him. Basically, he made the same mistake as Maverick in Top Gun during the training fight with Viper and Jester. That movie fight is almost identical to how Richthofen's last fight went, except with more modern planes. The fighter was piloted by Roy Brown, a Canadian ace. At the same time Brown shot at Richthofen, ground fire hit Richthofen too. A bullet ripped through Richthofen's chest. Brown was credited with the kill, but the debate still rages as to who really killed Richtofen, since they both used the same type of bullets. Richtofen maintained consciousness barely long enough to land his plane behind enemy lines. He died near the Somme battlefield, which had also been his main hunting ground. It was less than 2 weeks before his 26th birthday. Peace would be declared just 7 months later. Allied soldiers recovered his body and buried it with full military honors. 5 kills is considered the threshold to become an ace, since that feat requires extreme skill. Olga ended up with 40 kills. When Richtofen died, he had 80 confirmed kills, plus several more unconfirmed ones. Richtofen still stands as the ace of aces for World War I, which means he had more confirmed kills than anyone on either side. Richtofen died in battle, but his fame as the Red Baron continues on more than a century after his death. He is still considered one of the best fighter pilots ever to take to the skies. His leadership style, hunter tactical mentality, and practical application of the Dictabolka are still taught to modern fighter pilots. Manfred von Richthofen fulfilled his destiny and shares the same fate as Achilles: death in combat, but eternal fame. The 100th anniversary of the World War I armistice is coming up on November 11th. It was easily the most horrific conflict in human history. In 4 short years, technology and tactics leaped centuries ahead. For the first time in human history, soldiers had to face planes, tanks, chemical warfare, and 24/7 artillery barrages. Young men all over the world responded to the call of duty. Millions never made it home. Millions more came back disfigured, or so mentally traumatized that they could barely function. History now remembers them as the lost generation, because of how few came out okay. This episode is dedicated to all the young men who fought and died in World War I. There is a quick postscript about Richtofen's younger brother. He survived the war with 40 confirmed kills, matching Olga, and earned the Blue Max just like his older brother. After the war, he married a countess, had 2 kids, and became a commercial pilot. He died in 1922 due to an engine failure in the plane he was flying, but landed in a way that saved the passengers. As always, we would love to hear your feedback. You can email us at historynachos@gmail.com. We now also have pages on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon, and PayPal. Please consider making a donation to support making more episodes. Any amount is greatly appreciated. The links are in the description. For those of you that want more details of Richtofen's story, he wrote an autobiography called The Red Fighter Pilot during his time off from the front. It includes play-by-play commentary of his most harrowing fights. His life is well documented because Richtofen was such a famous figure in a relatively modern time. The Dictabolka is also widely available, and it just takes a few minutes to read, which I highly recommend. I also recommend watching Top Gun and picking out when they use Bolka's tactics. Or, of course, you can look it all up online. Until next time, thanks for listening.